What if I told you that the most brutal battlefield of World War I, the infamous French Verdun front, wasn't only about blood and trenches, but also about scandals so filthy they could rival Harvey Weinstein's Hollywood empire of abuse? Imagine young soldiers, trapped in mud and death, finding forbidden comfort in the arms of widows, nurses, and even officers' wives. These secret liaisons weren't just whispers of desire, they were survival, rebellion, and danger rolled into one. Just as Jeffrey Epstein's hidden world of power and exploitation shocked modern society, Verdun's hidden sexual underworld revealed how lust thrived even where death reigned. Tell us in the comments which country and city you're watching from, and subscribe now, because what you're about to hear will leave you stunned. Verdun, 1916. A place etched into memory as the bloodiest battlefield of World War I. But beneath the thunder of cannons and the endless graves lay another truth, one history books rarely whisper: the filth of desire that surged in the shadows. Soldiers who had marched expecting only mud and death soon found themselves entangled in scandalous webs of lust, desperation, and secret affairs. The French military tried to maintain order, but the pressures of war had cracked society's moral codes. Men who lived one breath away from death often sought forbidden comfort, and the women around Verdun, wives, nurses, widows, became entwined in this secret theater of passion. In a makeshift hospital near the Verdun lines, young nurse Camille tended to broken bodies. She was only 20, but war had already aged her soul. Her hands touched torn flesh daily, yet one night her trembling fingers lingered too long on the arm of Private Jean Morel. He was 19, with shrapnel scars across his chest, but his smile lit up the candlelit ward. Their secret began with whispered words after midnight, with stolen touches beneath the canvas of the field hospital. Camille risked everything, her career, her dignity, even her life, because the French army forbade intimacy between medical staff and patients. Yet she and Jean surrendered to their insatiable desires, finding ecstasy in the middle of despair. Diaries later revealed that such encounters were not rare. Many nurses and soldiers broke the rules because death itself made morality fragile. Further behind the lines, in a ruined farmhouse, another scandal brewed. Madame Colette, a widow of 40, had turned her abandoned property into what soldiers whispered of as the House of Comfort. She offered warm meals and a bed, but her reputation came from something else: her willingness to take soldiers into her arms, sometimes several in a single night. To the authorities, she was a disgrace. To the men who had stared death in the face, she was salvation. French court records show soldiers punished for visiting her, but Colette herself was shielded by powerful officers who also indulged in her hospitality. Just like Harvey Weinstein once used his influence to control Hollywood's darkest secrets, Colette used her position to build an empire of survival, one scandal at a time. The greatest scandals were not between soldiers and widows, but among officers who wielded power like a weapon. Captain Henry Girac, a decorated Verdun officer, became infamous for summoning young war widows under the guise of offering aid. In reality, he demanded intimacy in exchange for ration cards and shelter. Letters confiscated by French censors revealed accusations that Girac used fear and authority to control women. Scandals eerily similar to Jeffrey Epstein's empire of manipulation. The parallels are haunting. Both men built their worlds on vulnerability, secrecy, and exploitation. For Girac, the battlefield's chaos made him untouchable. Soldiers gossiped, but no one dared confront him. Power, sex, and war blended into one dark potion that eroded morality. Scandals in Verdun were not only whispered, but sometimes exposed through letters. Soldiers wrote to their wives back home, but censors intercepted many of these notes. Some revealed shocking affairs, men describing nights with widows, nurses, or even with other soldiers. One intercepted letter described a soldier's 5 nights of paradise with a woman he never named, echoing the boldness of Eleanor's scandalous stories from the Victorian brothels decades earlier. When such letters leaked into villages, wives burned with shame, families fractured, and reputations shattered. The French military hushed these revelations, fearing they would crush morale. Yet the truth spread like wildfire in cafes and barracks. Verdun was not just a battlefield of shells, but of filthy secrets. In the horror of Verdun, sex became rebellion, a moment of humanity against death.
For some, it was survival. For others, exploitation. And for all, it left scars unseen, but deeply felt. When we read these stories today, we can't help but see the same patterns in modern scandals. Weinstein in Hollywood, Epstein in Manhattan, R. Kelly in music. History teaches us this. Where power and vulnerability collide, filth thrives in the shadows. The first cracks of Verdun's hidden world reveal passion, betrayal, and power masked by mud and blood. But this was only the beginning. The next scandal takes us into the very heart of Verdun's trenches, where desperation and lust mixed with fear, creating shocking unions you won't believe. If the hospitals and farmhouses of Verdun whispered scandal, the trenches screamed them. Here, men lived knee-deep in mud, surrounded by rats, corpses, and despair. Yet even in this hell, desire found a way. Just as modern tabloids revealed the hidden lives of R. Kelly, using secrecy and control to manipulate vulnerable victims, Verdun's trenches became breeding grounds for forbidden intimacy. Historical accounts tell of French women sneaking into the trenches at night, bringing food, wine, and something more. Some were lovers who braved shellfire to see their men. Others were widows seeking comfort. Still others exchanged intimacy for protection and rations. In diaries confiscated by French censors, soldiers described nights where love conquered fear, and the sound of laughter drowned out the roar of guns. For some, these encounters were the only reminder they were still human. But not all was romance. Some officers turned these visits into opportunities for exploitation. Lieutenant Pierre Marchand demanded that women who entered his trench pay with their bodies. Survivors wrote of women coerced, trading dignity for survival. It mirrored the Weinstein scandal, power weaponized, secrets enforced by silence, shame, and fear. Just as Hollywood whispered about Weinstein for decades before the truth exploded, Verdun's soldiers whispered of Marchand's cruelty, but no one dared report him.
Not all scandals involved women. When survival hinged on brotherhood, lines blurred. Letters later revealed men forming intimate bonds with each other, their love hidden behind uniforms. A sergeant described his trenchmate as "my reason to fight, my only warmth at night." At the time, such relationships were unthinkable, punishable by disgrace. Yet they happened, raw and real, born from desperation. Today, when stories like Oscar Wilde's persecution or modern military scandals surface, they remind us how love in forbidden forms has always existed, even under fire. Military police sometimes caught couples, or men together, in compromising situations. Punishments were swift: transfers, imprisonment, public humiliation. One widow was paraded through a village, accused of being a traitor to the nation for offering herself to soldiers. The parallels to Monica Lewinsky's public shaming are unmistakable. Private desire turned into public scandal. Reputations crushed, while the powerful walked away untouched. One story, preserved in a soldier's journal, recounts a night when German bombardments paused and silence blanketed the trench. A woman named Marguerite appeared, barefoot, carrying wine. She stayed until dawn, moving between soldiers, her body becoming a battlefield of its own. At sunrise, shells returned. By noon, she was dead, caught in the blast. The soldiers wrote of her as a legend, a spirit of Verdun who gave them one night of life before death. The trenches of Verdun were more than mud and blood. They were theaters of desire, shame, and survival. From secret loves to coerced encounters, every night carried the weight of scandal. But beyond the trenches lay the shadowy world of spies and seduction, where sexuality became a weapon of war. At Verdun, not every scandal was born in the trenches or the hospitals. Some came from the shadows of espionage. Just as modern headlines exposed how figures like Jeffrey Epstein or Mata Hari weaponized sexuality to manipulate the powerful, Verdun's battlefield gave rise to a dark theater
where seduction became as deadly as a rifle. French intelligence feared that German agents were using courtesans, widows, and even French women themselves to extract military secrets. The line between intimacy and treason blurred.
Although Mata Hari herself was not stationed at Verdun, her legend cast a long shadow. This Dutch dancer-turned-spy, executed in 1917 for espionage, embodied the fears of French commanders that women use their beauty to seduce officers into revealing secrets. Reports from Verdun archives describe officers compromised during drunken nights, whispering troop movements into the ears of mysterious women. Just as Weinstein's victims later confessed to being silenced by power, Verdun's soldiers silenced themselves with guilt and fear. One of the most shocking scandals involved a woman known only as Madame Rouge. Stationed in a brothel near Verdun, she was rumored to be a German agent. She entertained both French soldiers and officers, extracting details of supply routes and morale. French counterintelligence intercepted her letters, coded with invisible ink, describing troop numbers. When she was finally arrested, the military was torn. Many officers defended her, claiming she had saved their sanity during the war. But court records show she was shot for treason. Her story echoed the duality of Epstein's women, simultaneously victims and participants in a corrupt system. What made espionage scandals more devastating was the mix of genuine love and manipulation. A captain's diary, recovered after his death, described his obsession with a woman named Elise, who often visited his quarters. He confessed that he told her everything because her lips demanded truth. When Elise vanished, so did entire artillery plans. The betrayal broke him, and weeks later, he died on the line. The diary was censored, but whispers of Elise lived on in Verdun cafes, fueling suspicion toward every woman who dared cross the front lines. The French military tried to maintain strict morality codes, banning soldiers from engaging with women near the front. But reality made rules meaningless. Survival and desire collided, and in that chaos, espionage thrived. Just like the Monica Lewinsky scandal showed how personal intimacy could destabilize political power, Verdun's scandals showed how desire could shift the tides of war. One kiss, one night, one whispered secret could change the outcome of battles. Looking back, the scandals of spies and seduction at Verdun reveal that sex was never only about desire. It was a currency, a weapon, and a mask for betrayal. From Mata Hari's legend to Madame Rouge's tragic end, these stories remind us that where power exists, intimacy becomes dangerous. Espionage turned love into treason at Verdun, proving that desire could kill as swiftly as bullets. But beyond spies and coded kisses lay an even filthier secret: the rise of organized comfort houses sanctioned by the military itself, where scandal became systematized and survival was bought with flesh. Verdun was chaos, but by 1916, the French High Command sought to manage the desires of soldiers. Instead of preventing scandals, they institutionalized them. Military-sanctioned brothels, nicknamed Maisons Tolérées, were established near the front. To the public, this system was hidden. To soldiers, it was an open secret. It was the state's way of controlling both morale and morality, while simultaneously indulging in the very corruption it condemned. Just as governments in the modern world have turned a blind eye to scandals involving elites like Epstein's network, the French military quietly normalized vice in uniform. These brothels became big business. Officers negotiated contracts with local women, often widows or refugees, who had no choice but to agree. Payment was controlled by the military. Soldiers lined up by the dozens, ration tickets in hand, as though intimacy were another battlefield commodity like bread or bullets. Reports show men waiting in mud-soaked queues, their turn lasting mere minutes, overseen by military police who ensured order. Desire was industrialized, processed, and stamped with approval. Like Weinstein's casting couch, power defined consent. Women who resisted often faced ruin. while those who complied became tools of survival.
The tragedy was not only in the exploitation, but in the silence. Women forced into these brothels rarely left accounts. Their voices were erased. One anonymous nurse wrote bitterly in her diary, "We mend their flesh by day, and at night they are destroyed again." The French state justified the system as protection, claiming it prevented assaults and disease from spreading uncontrolled. But beneath this logic lay humiliation. Many of the women were refugees, some teenagers, stripped of homes and dignity, now reduced to bodies rationed by the hour. Their story echoes modern sex trafficking scandals, proving that war creates not only widows, but victims of systemic abuse. What made the brothels most scandalous was the hypocrisy. Soldiers who pursued personal affairs with nurses or widows were punished harshly if caught, but those who lined up in military brothels faced no consequence. Officers who exploited women for power were protected by the system itself. This double standard mirrors the Lewinsky scandal. One young woman vilified publicly, while powerful men emerged with reputations intact. At Verdun, the state decided which scandals were condemned and which were quietly permitted. It wasn't morality that guided policy, it was control. Despite strict censorship, word of the comfort houses eventually reached home. Families were horrified. Mothers asked why their sons were being encouraged to risk disease and disgrace by their own government. Clergy condemned the practice as sinful, yet the French command silenced critics, claiming it was necessary to preserve fighting strength. Behind the closed doors of military tribunals, doctors tracked infections, recording that thousands of soldiers contracted syphilis and gonorrhea. Files revealed outbreaks so severe that entire units were sidelined. The system meant to protect the army was in fact weakening it. Still, the brothels persisted because silence was easier than reform. Looking at these brothels today, we see the same patterns in modern scandals. Institutions protecting power by sacrificing the vulnerable. From Epstein's private island to the systemic abuse uncovered in Hollywood and the church, the story remains unchanged. Authority creates systems to normalize what should remain unthinkable. Verdun's brothels are not just relics of the past, they are reminders that when war strips away humanity, exploitation becomes policy. The brothels of Verdun proved that the French command wasn't just tolerating filth, it was manufacturing it. But as soldiers indulged in state-sanctioned vice, another scandal festered in the very barracks themselves, forbidden liaisons among comrades, where loyalty and desire collided in secret bonds that risked ruin if exposed.
In a world where death was everywhere, soldiers clung to life wherever they could find it. For many, comfort came not from women smuggled into trenches or brothels, but from the comrade who slept beside them. Just as modern scandals, like the outing of powerful figures caught in secret affairs, reveal hidden truths about desire, Verdun exposed what the army tried hardest to bury: the existence of intimacy between men. Military diaries describe bonds that went beyond friendship. One corporal wrote, "He was my breath when gas filled the trench, my fire when the night froze me." The language of survival intertwined with the language of desire. These weren't brief encounters, they were relationships forged in mud, fear, and silence. The army expected men to die for each other. Some dared to live for each other too. Yet these relationships came with risks greater than shells. Homosexuality was criminalized, and discovery meant punishment, transfer, imprisonment, or public disgrace. Court-martial records revealed that men were occasionally caught in compromising acts, shamed in front of their units, branded as perverts. The treatment mirrored modern scandals like Oscar Wilde's trial, where private desire was turned into public humiliation. The shame wasn't in the act itself, it was in being exposed. One account tells of two sergeants who shared a cot, shielding each other from the cold. Their secret lasted months until a jealous rival reported them. The punishment was swift. One was imprisoned, the other transferred to a suicide unit on the front line. Weeks later, he was dead. Their story spread through the barracks like fire, whispered with a mix of fear and awe. For some soldiers, it was a warning. For others, it was proof that love, even forbidden, was worth dying for. Today, when the military still grapples with cases of harassment, outing, and scandals of hidden affairs, Verdun feels eerily familiar. Just as R. Kelly's abuses thrived in silence until survivors spoke, Verdun's secret loves thrived in whispers, surviving only in censored letters and hidden diaries. Silence protected reputations, but erased lives. Historians like George Chauncey and Robert Nye argue that same-sex relationships in wartime were more common than official records suggest. Men deprived of women, living in constant danger, often blurred the lines between necessity and desire. But official narratives scrubbed these truths, leaving only fragments. These hidden stories are essential because they remind us that human intimacy has always resisted labels, laws, and punishments. In the barracks of Verdun, brotherhood sometimes became forbidden love, a bond punished as betrayal, yet remembered as salvation by those who risked it. But as soldiers fought secret wars of the heart, another scandal loomed: the exploitation of women in nearby villages, where survival itself became currency for intimacy. Verdun wasn't only trenches, shells, and soldiers. It was also villages clinging to life in the war's shadow. Civilians, mostly women, children, and the elderly, endured hunger, fear, and the constant thunder of artillery. And in that desperation, another battlefield opened. The body became a bargaining chip. Just as modern scandals like Epstein's trafficking empire exposed how survival was traded for silence and complicity, Verdun's villages saw their women trapped in transactions of flesh and power. French supply lines were stretched to breaking. Villages often went weeks without proper food. Soldiers held rations, and in many cases, they held them hostage. Reports surfaced of soldiers demanding companionship in exchange for bread or canned meat. Widows with children were the most vulnerable, torn between letting their family starve or surrendering to humiliation. Court records later buried these stories, but whispered testimonies show women who chose survival over pride. One note smuggled to a priest read simply, "My children ate, that is all." In Verdun's outskirts, abandoned barns and basements became what soldiers called maisons grises, gray houses. These were not official brothels, but informal spaces where desperate women agreed to secret arrangements. Payment wasn't always money. It was food, coal, protection from raids, or medical care. For the women, it was survival. For the soldiers, it was indulgence. The hypocrisy stung, as many of these same men condemned dishonorable women publicly while privately exploiting them. Much like Weinstein's double life as philanthropist and predator, the scandal lay in the gap between public virtue and private vice. By late 1917, whispers of les enfants de Verdun, children born of these exchanges, began to spread. Some were raised in silence, their fathers never acknowledged. Others were abandoned at convent doors. Records from the diocese reveal priests overwhelmed with baptisms of infants whose mothers refused to name the fathers. War not only scarred the land, it reshaped bloodlines. These children were living reminders of bargains made under duress. Society branded them shameful, yet their very existence proved the hypocrisy of men who fought for honor while desecrating dignity. Modern scandals remind us that when systems collapse, power preys on desperation. From refugee camps in today's wars to trafficking rings uncovered in Europe and the US, the pattern remains: survival is bought and silence is coerced. Verdun's village scandals are not just history, they are warnings. The war ended in 1918, but the shame never did. In Verdun's villages, intimacy became survival currency, leaving scars that lingered longer than the war itself. But the darkest scandal still awaits:
a forbidden affair within the French high command, where betrayal and lust shook the very leadership of Verdun, echoing like a death knell for honor itself. By 1916, Verdun had become not only a battlefield of men, but a theater of reputation. French generals lived in relative comfort compared to their soldiers, housed in secure command posts. But inside those guarded rooms, whispers told of liaisons that threatened the moral authority of the leadership itself. Just as scandals like Bill Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky revealed vulnerabilities at the highest levels of power, Verdun's command was not immune. General Philippe Pétain, the Lion of Verdun, became a national hero for his defensive brilliance. Yet diaries and rumors spoke of his affair with a married woman who frequented his command post under the guise of charitable work. Some claimed she was a nurse, others whispered she was the wife of a fellow officer. What mattered wasn't her identity, it was the hypocrisy. While soldiers died for honor, their leaders indulged in forbidden pleasures. If discovered, such an affair would have been more than scandalous. It would have undermined French morale, proving that even the highest officers used power for indulgence while their men starved and bled. Letters later uncovered suggested the woman leveraged her connection to Pétain for influence, her brother receiving a cushy posting away from the front. This mirrored modern stories of favoritism through intimacy, like the accusations of Harvey Weinstein's casting couch. In both cases, sex became a currency of advancement, traded under the shadow of power. In the fall of 1917, suspicions grew when intercepted correspondence hinted at favoritism tied to Pétain's household. Though evidence was destroyed to prevent national shame, whispers spread among officers. Some mocked the Lion of Verdun as a man undone by a woman's kiss. Others defended him, claiming love was the only shield against despair. Either way, the damage was done. A hero was human, his lust as muddy as the trenches. When leaders fall into scandal, their entire institutions tremble. Just as the Epstein scandal tainted princes, billionaires, and politicians, Verdun's whispered affairs tainted the myth of France's heroic command. Soldiers asked, if generals betrayed their vows, why should men die to keep theirs? The moral rot wasn't in the trenches, it was at the top. The war ended, but the scandals of Verdun remained buried. Historians later debated whether Pétain's affair truly happened or whether it was fabricated by rivals. Yet the persistence of the rumor reveals something deeper. War doesn't just destroy lives, it erodes trust. Every whispered kiss in a command tent echoed louder than the shells outside. From the brothels sanctioned by generals to the forbidden love among comrades, from starving widows trading survival for shame, to whispers of generals undone by desire, Verdun was more than a battle. It was a crucible of human weakness. The same patterns echo in modern scandals, where the powerful trade morality for indulgence and the vulnerable are silenced. Just as Weinstein, Epstein, and Clinton scandals redefined our era, Verdun's hidden stories redefined the myth of noble war. Love, lust, betrayal, and survival, these were Verdun's true weapons. Tell us in the comments, which scandal shocked you most? And if you love your country's history, write its name below and subscribe for more hidden truths unmasked.